FDSE program up to the end of the second term in the current academic year versus the allocated capitation. State the plans by the government, if any, to review and adjust the FDSE funding from the current Kenya shillings 22 shillings 2.44 per student to assist schools in managing significant rise in cost for teaching materials and meals for boarding students, outlining the strategies that the government has implemented to enable Schools Board of Management BOM to review the compensation of support staffs employed by the board on behalf of the government and indicate measures put in place, if any, to ensure timely remunerations of board employees by the schools administration. Senator Alexander Munyimondigi, M1.
The third statement is by Senator Tabitha Karanja. However, pursuant to written request, that statement is dropped. The next statement is by Senator Crystal Asige. What is the point of order, Senator Faki?
I rise pursuant to Standing Order number 37 of the Senate Standing Orders to seek leave of the Senate to adjourn to discuss a definite matter of urgent national importance, namely the security situation in Lamu County heightened by the recent attacks by suspected Al-Shabaab militants.
Now, honorable senators, the motion has attained the requested number of support, and therefore are we slated for 5:30 today for discussion. Thank you. Senator Crystal Asige, that statement is dropped. The fifth is nominated Senator George Mbugua. Kindly proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee of National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations on the preparedness of the Kenya government in mitigating the effects of the anticipated El Nino-induced climate extremes between August and December 2023. In the statement, the committee should, 1, highlight the cross-sectoral preparedness by the government in mitigating the adverse effects of the anticipated El Nino-induced climate extremes to avert human suffering and prevent environmental degradation. 2, explain the measures and policies, if any, established by the national and county governments on disaster intervention through capacity building for early warning and disaster preparedness, and how the same are being applied to mitigate climate-related disasters. And 3, state if there is substantial public awareness on the impending impact of the anticipated El Nino weather phenomena, particularly to the vulnerable population. And 4, ascertain whether the national and county governments have instituted cross-sectoral collaborative teams to manage the effects of the anticipated El Nino, drawing lessons from the past oversights and neglect as witnessed in the El Nino catastrophe of 1997-98. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Senator for Nairobi, Senator Edwin Sifuna. Just make the two statements at once. Yeah?
Most obliged, Speaker. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations regarding a morbid and most unfortunate claim that corpses were hired from morgues during the anti-tax demonstrations of June and July 2023. In the statement, the committee should ascertain the authenticity of the claims by the IG of Police that corpses were hired during the June and July demonstrations, and if so, state the number of bodies hired, the mortuaries involved, and the culpable individuals and organizations. Second statement, Mr. Speaker, is pursuant to Standing Order 53-1, to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Health on the prevalent and unfair hiring and promotions of nurses at the Kenyatta National Hospital and hospitals run by the Nairobi City County Government. In the statement, the committee should, number one, explain why the KNH employs new nurses from outside on permanent and pensionable terms, through routinely issued internal advertisements while bypassing many of those already on contract at the same institution. Number two, investigate allegations that promotions to higher nursing cadres at the hospital do not follow the key elements of experience, institutional knowledge, and fair labor practices. Number three, cause the KNH management to provide a comprehensive breakdown of recent employments and promotions in the nursing cadres covering the last 2 years for both permanent and contract employees, with emphasis on relevant qualifications, experience, and equity in hiring. And lastly, explain the reasons for unfair or skewed promotion among nursing cadres in the Nairobi County hospitals, where there are allegations that some nurses who have worked for 10 years or more are only promoted up one scale instead of the 2 that is expected. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Next, Senator Tabitha Mutenda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Information, Communication and Technology regarding the state of digital skills literacy in Kenya. In the statement, the committee should, one, provide data and statistics on digital skills literacy among Kenyan public officers and the general population, clarifying whether there is a standardized assessment tool used to gauge digital skills proficiency among the Kenyan population. Two, report to the implementation of the Kenya National Digital Master Plan for the period 2022-2032, aimed at, among other things, equipping over 20 million Kenyans with digital skills. Indicate whether any efforts have been made by the government to incorporate technology effectively into the education curriculum in Kenya. And four, state the measures put in place to promote digital literacy to ensure all Kenyans access digital job opportunities, government services that are offered online, and are aware of the cyber threats, indicating any collaboration the government has with entities in the digital space. Thank you.
The Honorable Beatrice Ogola.
Honorable Speaker, this is a request for a statement on the loss of an AK-47 rifle in Dewa Police Station, Dewa Sub-County in Homa Bay County. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to the Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations regarding the loss and subsequent recovery of an AK-47 rifle in Dewa Police Station. In the statement, Mr. Speaker, the committee should, one, explain the circumstances leading to the loss and eventual recovery of an AK-47 rifle at Dewa Police Station, outlining the precise chain of custody, including the issuing authority, the recipient, the intended purpose for which it was issued, and whether any other firearms were issued concurrently, Mr. Speaker, sir. Two, the committee should provide a comprehensive report regarding the duration of the missing rifle when it remained unaccounted for, stating whether any suspects were identified as having been involved in its disappearance. Three, Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee should elucidate the circumstances surrounding the recovery of the AK-47 rifle, including details on when and how it was located, the condition it was found in, and the method employed to recover it. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee should state the current assessment of safety and security within our community in light of this event. Senator Beatrice Ogola.
Next, Order Clerk.
Order number 8, procedural motion, reduction of publication period of specified bills.
The majority leader.
Madzaya. Wait, Sifuna. Sifuna. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the following motion that pursuant on the reduction of publication period of specified bills, that, Mr. Speaker, pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 139, the Senate resolves to reduce the publication period of the following bills that were published on the 15th of September 2023 from 14 days to 4 days. That is 1, the Facilities Improvement Financing Bill, Senate Bill number 43 of 2023, and 2, the Primary Healthcare Bill, Senate Bills number 44 of 2023. Mr. Speaker, these are procedural motion requesting the House, seeking the indulgence, that we reduce the publication period of these particular bills because they are of an urgent nature. You do appreciate, Mr. Speaker, that health is a devolved function, and there has been a conversation around what county governments and what is their place in UHC. And county governments have requested, Mr. Speaker, I have seen, and I've just confirmed with the chair and members of the, what is it called, the health committee, that they've had extensive conversation about these bills. They're actually 4 in nature. 2 have begun in the Assembly, 2 are beginning in the Senate, so that without getting to the second quarter of the financial year in our county assemblies, our counties can streamline their operations with UHC, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I find the reasons given as justified, both from the national and the county governments, and therefore I've requested that the House do agree that the Committee on Health considers this bill within that specified period. The beauty, Mr. Speaker, with this is that during the time that they'll be doing public participation, they will actually do this in Turkana, which is quite important because these are counties, some of the counties that actually need UHC, Mr. Speaker, some of the very affected parts of the country. And therefore, with those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move and request the minority leader to second. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do second.
Now, honorable senators, I proceed to propose the question that pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 139 of the Senate resolves to reduce the publication period of the following bills that were published on the 15th of September 2023 from 14 days to 4 days. 1, the Facilities Improvement Financing Bill, Senate Bills number 43 of 2023, and 2, the Primary Health Care Bill, Senate Bills number 44 of 2023. Now, honorable senators, you will note that on our standing orders, each of you will have 20 minutes to make their contribution on this matter. You may, however, wish to invoke Standing Order 111 and limit debate, but that, again, is up to you. This being a procedural motion, we may either limit debate or proceed straight to put the question. Very well. Now, honorable senators, I now proceed to put the question. That pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 139, the Senate resolves to reduce the publication period of the following bills that are published on the 15th September 2023 from 14 days to 4 days. 1, the Facilities Improvement Financing Bill, Senate Bills number 43 of 2023, and 2, the Primary Health Care Bill, Senate Bills number 44 of 2023. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 9, the Equalization Fund Appropriation Bill, Senate Bills number 30 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to authorize the issue of a sum of money out of the Equalization Fund and its application towards the service of the year ending 30th June 2024, to appropriate that sum for certain public basic services and for connected purposes. The Food and Feed Safety Control Coordination Bill, National Assembly Bills number 21 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to provide for the coordination of the public institutions in the control, to provide for the role of county governments in food and feed safety and for connected purposes. Order number 11, the Water Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills number 33 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Water Act 2016 to provide for public-private partnerships arrangements and for connected purposes. Order number 12, the Facilities Improvement Financing Bill, Senate Bills number 43 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to provide for public health facility improvement financing and management and administration of the improvement financing and for connected purposes. Order number 13, the Primary Health Care Bill, Senate Bills number 44 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to provide for a framework for delivery of and access to and management of primary health care and for connected purposes.
Next order. Senator Kamar, kindly approach the chair, please. Now, honorable senators, for the convenience of the House, we proceed to rearrange the sequence of today's order paper pursuant to Standing Order 45-2 and proceed straight away to prosecute order number 19. And thereafter, we will come back to the order as contained in today's order paper. Clerk, kindly proceed to call that particular order.
Order number 19, the Kenyan Sign Language Bill, Senate Bills number 9 of 2023, second reading.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to move the Kenyan Sign Language Bill 2023, Senate Bills number 9 of 2023. Mr. Speaker, even before I move, I would like to inform the House that this week is the International Week for the Deaf, and so it is a very appropriate time for us to move this bill. I want to send a warm message of congratulations to our Kenyans who are of this group that are deaf. And more than that, I want to remember in a special way the sign language technical teams, both in the media, who talk to Kenyans on behalf of, who talk to Kenyans who cannot communicate verbally. I want to also congratulate those who have chosen to be teachers, special teachers for the deaf children. Mr. Speaker, only recently we went as a Committee of Education to special education schools, and we went to the School for the Deaf in Uasin Gishu County. And Mr. Speaker, in this week, I know they're celebrating this week all over the country, but I want to send greetings to these people because the teachers who have chosen to be special education teachers are very special people in this country. They have the patience, they have the courage, and they have the intelligence to communicate what most of us cannot communicate. So with those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I now beg to move the bill. Mr. Speaker, the Kenyan Sign Language Bill 2023 aims to create a comprehensive legal framework for the use of sign language to ensure that deaf learners are given the same opportunities as all other learners in the education system to be fully effective and productive members of society. This is extremely important because of the right of the child, right to education, which is a basic right in the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, before setting out the specific provisions of the bill, it befits us to understand the motivation behind the legislative proposal. The linguistic landscape can be challenging for the population who may be deaf or hard of hearing, as traditional education, employment, and participation in public life. Mr. Speaker, in other jurisdictions such as Australia, it is now increasingly recognized that signing deaf people constitute a group like any other non-English speaking language group. This shows that meaningful legal recognition of national sign language leads to better enjoyment of human rights. Mr. Speaker, it's also worth noting that in our own constitution, we have 3 languages. We have English recognized, we have Kiswahili recognized, and the sign language recognized. The Kenyan Sign Language Bill, Mr. Speaker, carries significant consequences for the inclusion and accessibility of deaf individuals in the Kenyan society. It seeks to dismantle barriers that have hindered the full participation of the deaf community in various spheres of life, including judicial proceedings, education, and employment. So in a way, this is a group that are felt discriminated against, although there are provisions in the Constitution that gives them the right. Mr. Speaker, the bill therefore draws its strength from the Constitution, particularly Article 10(2), which designates human dignity, equity, social justice, inclusivity, equality, human rights, non-discrimination, and the protection of the marginalized as national values and principles of governance. Furthermore, Article 7(3)(b) of the Constitution emphasizes the promotion of indigenous languages as the Kenyan Sign Language, Braille, and other communication formats accessible to persons with disabilities. Similarly, Article 54(1)(d) stipulates that a person with any disability is entitled to use sign language, Braille, or other appropriate means of communication. The Constitution, therefore, envisions that public institutions shall establish facilities to ensure the inclusion of deaf persons and those who are hard of hearing in their processes. Mr. Speaker, sir, Clause 4 of the bill provides formal recognition to the use of Kenyan Sign Language by the deaf or those of hard hearing, emphasizing its importance in communication. Mr. Speaker, Clause 5 of the bill outlines the duties of both the national and the county levels of government regarding the sign provision of Kenya Sign Language interpretation. Mr. Speaker, it is very important that this is regulated. We have seen a mushrooming of people who are saying we are qualified interpreters, and since those of us who don't know whether the interpretation is correct or not, we just assume you hire somebody when you have a workshop, because currently we are saying in workshops and meetings and conferences, you should have interpreters. It's very important that that is also registered and maintained. We have conferences, whether it is this Senate or WASA or any other group, and we need an interpreter wishing to provide education. This is very important. Just the way we say you must register as a teacher with a TSC, we need a body within the Ministry of Education say, I am an interpreter. There should be a designated officer, therefore, from the Ministry of Education, responsible for maintaining the register of the registered interpreters in an accessible manner, so that anybody who the bill permits individuals to inspect the register upon payment of for sign language interpreters and the promotion of basic Kenyan language among government employees at the national and county level. This promotion, as I had mentioned earlier, means we still was deaf. See, actually, every child has a right to education in the form in which they can enjoy the education. It is very important to note that on that child, and so Kenyan Sign Language should just be one of our third languages, and we should not be. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Kenyan Sign Language Bill emphasizes inclusivity. The bill mandates the provision of services, making information, social inclusion, and participation in various aspects of society, such as community events, public meetings, and cultural activities. Hence, the need to make this language as prominent as the other languages. Mr. Speaker, by mandating the use of Kenya Sign Language in judicial proceedings, as I said earlier, the bill ensures that deaf individuals have equal access to justice. Sign language legislation can help protect the rights of the deaf community and ensure that they are not discriminated against. This is a fundamental right that should not be denied based on one's hearing ability. And especially as we continue to emphasize in this bill, the use of sign language in the judicial proceedings. There are people who have even lost land, Mr. Speaker, because they did not know the transaction was going on as communications were happening, even when they were sitting next to the persons. So it is very important that we provide we provide a way of communication for them, and hence the importance of the sign language and the sign language bill. Honorable Speaker, this bill places a strong emphasis on education support for the deaf learners. The bill can have provisions related to education, ensuring that deaf students have access to quality education that includes sign language as a medium of instruction. This can empower deaf individuals with the skills and knowledge they need for personal and professional development. Mr. Speaker, although the integrated education system is dominant in Kenya, local schools that accommodate learners with disabilities encounter great challenges in creating an inclusive setting. Promoting the use of sign language and providing support for deaf individuals in education and employment, such legislation can enhance their access to job opportunities and reduce discrimination in the workplace. Mr. Speaker, when we went to the school for the deaf in Eldoret, we saw the challenges that the teachers encounter. Basically, because the teaching materials that are given to these schools are exactly the same as the teaching materials that are given to other schools. We also discovered that there is no provision on the ratio of the learners against the teachers. Because for a special child, the ratio has to be different because of the attention that these children require. And we discovered that there are still many challenges which this bill is trying to cure. Mr. Speaker, this legislation therefore seeks to acknowledge the status of the Kenyan Sign Language as a legitimate and distinct language in the Constitution. This recognition is essential in preserving linguistic diversity and cultural heritage. Nonetheless, the use of sign language as a teaching instrument is not fully integrated in the Kenyan education system, with over half the schools not having sign language curriculum. And this challenge, Mr. Speaker, is even touching on the institutions, the training institutions of our teachers. Mr. Speaker, because of the fact that teachers encounter special children as teachers in particular, because you never know when a deaf child is brought, you never know when a child with epilepsy is brought to your class, you never know those. It is very important that as we talk of the curriculum for learners, we also talk of the curriculum of the training institutions, so that every teacher can handle this kind of children. Deaf children are very easy to handle because they can see, they understand everything around the environment by seeing, but they need to communicate. So we are also proposing that in the teacher training institutions, a course on sign language should be undertaken. Just the way we say your second language is Kiswahili, take a third language called sign language as a teacher, so that every teacher can communicate. That way also in society, we will have a critical number of people in society that can actually communicate on our behalf if there is a challenge like that. And we should be able to, and they should be able to help. So apart from the teachers that we have in special schools, Mr. Speaker, I mean special training, the KISE, Kenya Institution of Special Schools, Special Education, we also need in the normal ordinary training TTCs, the teacher training colleges, to include an area, a course that will enable every teacher to be able to communicate. That will not be too much for the teacher. It's a skill that they can learn within the same period when they're learning other things, and it will be very useful. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, this country has signed and ratified international agreements and conventions that promote the rights and inclusion of people with disabilities. Enacting sign language legislation can demonstrate a commitment to meeting these international obligations. It also includes provisions for raising awareness about the importance of sign language and deaf culture among the general public and relevant institutions. Mr. Speaker, I wish to sincerely thank the members of the Committee of Education and my co-sponsor, Senator Crystal, who will be contributing later when she comes, for their insightful contributions during the consideration of the bill, and the stakeholders at large, because we had a very vibrant public participation. I would also like to recognize in a very special way the senator who worked with me in the last Senate, Senator Musuruve, who was really part and parcel of this bill, because we started the bill with her, and she did a lot of contribution at the beginning, because it's one bill that was picked in this Senate. I want to recognize her in a very, very special way. Senator Musuruve did a very good job on this bill. Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and I would like to request Senator Halwale to second.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate my sister, Professor Margaret Kana, for giving me this opportunity to second this very important bill. Mr. Speaker, this is a very important matter, and it's not surprising that a medical expert is the one seconding it, because sometimes the House, it would help if you assist of the seriousness of a bill based on actual humanly experience. Mr. Speaker, this is not a light matter. Worldwide, it is estimated that over 1.5 billion people are affected with some degree of loss of hearing. And that worldwide, we actually have 70 million people who are afflicted with deafness. And the bad news is, of these 70 million people in the world, 80% of them are from the developing countries, which means this is a problem in Africa, and by extension, therefore, in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, so that it is not lost to us, the problem of hearing loss not only affects the individual, but it also affects the family of that individual. And Mr. Speaker, it affects the friends of that individual, and what's more, it affects the economy. These people are not able to make their contribution in creation of the Commonwealth, of the family, the Commonwealth of the community, the Commonwealth of a nation. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, as I request members that we all stand behind Senator Sige and Senator Professor Margaret Kamal in quickly passing this bill, I would like to draw their attention on really what causes loss of hearing. The commonest cause, Mr. Speaker, is the natural aging process. As people age, so does loss of hearing become more and more evident. Then we have the contribution from accidents. It can be a mass accident, you are involved in a road traffic accident, or a direct hit on the hearing organ or hearing organs. Mr. Speaker, something which really lost to many Kenyans and which is very important is deafness as a result of noise pollution. And noise pollution is so rampant that it comes from some very bad places and some very good places. We all would be happy to condemn the music, loud music in the estates, the loud music in disco matangas that takes place in villages because they are bad. But we are also lost, honorable members, to the fact that churches are causing serious noise pollution. Some of the churches, and I don't wish to name any, they will go on playing their drums and shouting and preaching late into the night. And Mr. Speaker, this actually causes pollution. And with that pollution, slowly by slowly, people lose their hearing capacity. Is it lost on you, members, that some of the very loud preachers, and I know my own brother Bishop is looking at me with very keen eyes. I'm speaking technically, not emotionally. It should not be lost on us that if you listen to a preacher who preaches most of the time, they tend to speak louder because they think the people that they are talking to are not hearing them, so they raise their voices. It's because their hearing capacity has by itself gone down. Mr. Speaker, without the proper intervention, we have diseases that affect the ear, the nose, the throat, and these diseases actually lead to loss of decrease in hearing. What is more scary is that 60% of the young people, 18 years and below, who therefore this bill is really attempting to uplift, they get deaf because intervention was not met at the proper time. And the proper time is simple, Mr. Speaker, to encourage our women when they are pregnant to attend child maternal clinics.
Tabone, would you wish to be informed by Senator Kavindu?
Certainly, the gracious lady may inform me.
Kindly proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to inform Senator Halwale that I'm a preacher and I don't preach so loudly, I preach moderately. So when he's saying that preachers preach loudly because they lose their hearing, that is not true. I'm a preacher and I know that. So point of correction, and can you withdraw that because I'm a preacher? And apologize to preachers. Thank you.
Senator,
Thank you.
Senator Bone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr.
Senator
Speaker,
Bone,
I'm guided.
Kindly, Senator Bone, I do understand that you're a medical doctor. And therefore, your statement, is it based on your medical experience that the more the preachers speak in a loud manner, it therefore means that their own hearing has diminished? Is it medically proven? Are you saying that in a capacity as a medical doctor, or it just a statement that is not based on any scientific facts? Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to apologize to my sister if in any way you thought my statement was an affront to preachers. Not in any way. But if you ask doctors, they will tell you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that hearing is a manifestation of successful communication. And this is why the ones who are deaf, we are making a bill today to help them to communicate with people. When you are speaking, the reason why in a public rally where you don't have a hearing aid, you raise your voice, it is because, Mr. Speaker, medically, the intellect of the mind is tuned to inform you that even as you speak, those people you're speaking to must hear you. And as you strain yourself over and over, just like you are shouting for those people 100 meters away to hear you, and you are making noise, you are also hearing yourself. Your voice is polluting your own ears. Mr. Speaker, having apologized, I'll not go further. Allow me to conclude my contribution. I was saying that these children whose mothers do not attend clinics, whose mothers do not take them to the clinic during their early age, it is called the neonatal period, are more likely to lose their hearing sense. And it affects, Mr. Speaker, 60% of the population below 18 years. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, allow me to conclude by urging the public to know that there are interventions that we can make so as to reduce the people either with deafness or people with diminished hearing capacity. As I've said before, if you give good maternal care to our pregnant women, if you give good neonatal care to newly born children, is a huge contribution that you make. And because the majority of the people on social media, the majority of the people who have access to modern telephony, the majority of the people who have a good education are actually the minority of the community that is called the nation, these matters may look light. Mr. Speaker, we also would like to encourage people that you should have positive methods of communicating with children. Because some of the children with diminished hearing loss, Mr. Speaker, if you don't talk to them positively, especially if you are a teacher, you might think that this child is foolish. Positive communication means you talk to these children when you have, Mr. Speaker, eye contact. And members of the public ought to know that as we create this law, we have got hearing aids that actually make a difference. This House knows the common one that you see as loops that are looped into the child's ear or the patient's ear. They help. We also have, where families can afford care, we have what we call cochlear implants, which they can use. And then finally, the most important, and I'm happy it is captured in this bill, the government, both national and county, must make their own contribution in increasing the number of interpreters. In fact, Mr. Speaker, if you go to some of our rallies, if you watch some of the football matches, if you watch some of the crusades, the people who normally do interpretations are volunteers. They know in their own minds that in that crowd, in that audience, we have people who are not hearing. So they make their own contribution. So it would help, Mr. Speaker, that we all contribute towards increasing the number of interpreters. With those many remarks, I wish to second the bill as moved. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Senators. I now proceed to propose the question that the Kenyan Sign Language Bill, Senate Bills number 9 of 2023, be now read a second time. You may now proceed to make your contributions. Senator Wambua.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to make a contribution to this bill. And even as I do that, Mr. Speaker, I want to join you and the leadership of the Senate to welcome back our colleagues from recess and hope that this session, Mr. Speaker, shall be fruitful for the benefit of the people that we represent in this House. Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity, first of all, to really thank and congratulate Senator Professor Margaret Kamar and Senator Chris Olasige for coming up with such a wonderful bill. The Kenyan Sign Language Bill, Bill number 2023. The Speaker, I want to go straight to the provisions of the bill and declare that I fully support this bill. So, Speaker, when you look at the objects of this bill, as captured in clause 3, from A to I, the objects of this bill can be summed up as an attempt to help the deaf in society to realize their full potential, both in school and in society. That the promoters of this bill have applied their minds to constitutional provisions on the right to develop the Kenyan Sign Language and reduced that into a bill that then, if it is passed, and I know it will be, then it will give effect to the stated constitutional provisions. The Speaker, the bill in clause 4 speaks to a targeted public participation. Mr. Speaker and honorable colleagues, if there is one thing that the Constitution of Kenya 2010 blessed this nation with, is a provision to ensure that any legislation in any house, in any assembly, be it the National Assembly, the county assemblies, or the Senate, any legislation before it becomes an act of parliament, before it becomes law, it has to pass through public participation, so that the public can have a say on how they're being governed and how the laws that govern them are being made. For the most part, Mr. Speaker, public participation in a lot of instances when we are making laws has more or less become a PR exercise. It has become just an act of ticking the boxes and ensuring that we have lived to the expectations of the Constitution and the law. But in this bill, Mr. Speaker, the promoters are pushing for targeted public participation by the users and consumers of the Kenyan Sign Language, so that they are brought on board, that their views, their needs, and their aspirations are catered for when it comes to legislation. The Speaker, clause 6 recognizes that the Kenyan Sign Language is actually a first language to a section of our society, and that it is also a first language by choice to a section of our society. And in so doing, the Speaker, then it pushes for the use of sign language in legal proceedings, in our courts, in our tribunals. And the Speaker, that's a big step and a step in the right direction. And I want to take this opportunity, as Speaker, even as we push for that to happen in legal proceedings, and congratulate our mainstream media houses. Over a period of 5, 6, maybe 7 years, media houses have invested in sign language for especially their news bulletins. I would encourage them to take a bold step and make sign language part of their everyday, every minute, every hour communication with the public. So that even in broadcasts that are not news bulletins, then we have interpreters there who use a sign language. The Speaker, I like the provisions of Clause 7 of the bill, where the Cabinet Secretary is obligated to ensure that deaf learners are taught in a manner which they are able to understand, that the CS should ensure teachers of deaf children acquire sufficient competence in the use of English and Kiswahili language, and ensure development of supportive instructional materials for the education of deaf learners. Mr. Speaker, the provisions of that clause have very far-reaching implications on the Cabinet Secretary responsible for education. One, this clause, by the nature of the way it has been drafted, obligates the CS to ensure the training and the recruitment of additional special teachers, especially teachers for deaf children. That clause, Mr. Speaker, ensures that the Kenya Institute of Special Education, and I will cross-reference that to the provisions of Clause 18. You know, Mr. Speaker, for the longest time, the Kenya Institute of Special Education, which is based in Nairobi, has virtually been the only institution in this country that is training special teachers for all the schools in the country. So the competition for enrollment at KISE all the time has overwhelmed the capacity of the institution to absorb as many teachers as are necessary to ensure that the provisions of Clause 7 of this bill are met. So, Mr. Speaker, so that we don't pay lip service to a bill as important as this, then mechanisms must be put in place, and I'm very sure my teacher, Professor Kamar, will follow through on this one, to ensure then we begin to devolve KISE, that the Kenya Institute of Special Education cannot just be based in Nairobi. There will be a need to devolve that institution so that in Kakamega, we have a Kenya Institute of Special Education in the same way that we have Kenya medical training colleges all over the country, even constituencies at the constituency level. So, Mr. Speaker, we open opportunities for teachers to be trained for special education all over the country. That way, then, the provisions of Clause 7 will begin to make sense. Mr. Speaker,
The other obligation on the Cabinet Secretary is that because there is need then for him or her to ensure that there is development of sufficient supportive instructional materials, then my teacher, Professor Kamar, then we must also find a way of making it an obligation on the Minister for Education when they are doing capitation for schools, to ensure then that they factor the need to purchase special instructional materials to cater for the needs of children with difficulties in hearing. The Speaker, I fully support this bill, and as I conclude, the Speaker, the provisions of Clause 18, which I had made reference to. In fact, what the promoters of this bill are saying is that as much as is practically possible, then everybody who goes to school, they need to be trained in the Kenyan Sign Language. That is aspirational, but it's a good step. It's a place to begin. So that, in fact, going into the future, then the Kenyan Sign Language, because it is called Kenyan, which means it is uniquely Kenyan, then the Kenyan Sign Language becomes the third national or official language in this country. So, Mr. Speaker, then that way, we don't need special interpreters of messaging on radio, on TV, in public rallies. That if I go to Kakamega to address a rally, I can very easily just tap any person that has gone to a school and tell them, come here and translate for the people, because everybody then will have attained sufficient competencies for Kenyan Sign Language. If this Kenyan Sign Language, then it's our language, the Speaker, and I believe it is, then we must show it by example. We must begin to teach it in schools. It must begin to become an examinable subject in our schools. The Speaker, with those many remarks, I support the bill.
Senator Chirenge. Maybe before, Senator, you proceed,
okay.
Allow me to make this communication. I would like to acknowledge the presence in the Speaker's Gallery this afternoon, a visiting delegation from the County Assembly of Kajiado. The delegation comprises of 3 officers from the Office of the Speaker who are on a benchmarking visit with their counterparts in the Senate. Now, honorable senators, on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, I extend a warm welcome and I wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow Senator Tobiko under 1 minute to share a word of welcome.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, let me thank you for this opportunity. Let me take the chance to welcome the delegation from the Kajiado County Assembly to the Senate of the Republic of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, this team is on a working mission and learning mission at the Senate. I'm sure their time here will be well spent. It will be of value to the Assembly of Kajiado and to the great people of the County of Kajiado. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chirenge, kindly proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. And from the onset, I want also to join you to welcome a number of guests. I've seen today the senators, a lot of guests, from students to visiting delegations. Mr. Speaker, I want from the onset to congratulate Senator Professor Margaret Kamar, Deputy Speaker Emeritus, for bringing this bill, the Kenya Sign Language Bill 2023. Mr. Speaker, I was asking myself, is it possible to have what we call the special needs bill, so that we put everybody, the deaf, the blind, the mute, so that we don't need to do per legislation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill has come at a good time. I think we are having conversation and being cognizant of our people with special needs in our society. I want just to join my colleagues in supporting this bill and saying this is timely. Mr. Speaker, the issue of sign language or the deaf, Mr. Speaker, is something that the Constitution gave an attention. Article 210, not Article 210, the Constitution 2010, Mr. Speaker, as enumerated as languages of the Republic of Kenya, should include English, Kiswahili, and also the sign language. So I think we are rightfully in place. I think this is just elaboration of, Mr. Speaker, of recognition of this special group of individuals within our communities and within our nation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Article 44 and Article 54 on PWDs, Mr. Speaker, recognizes that the government has a role. And I want to request Senator Professor Margaret Kamar that we need audits as per Article 54.5, where it says the state shall ensure the progressive implementation of the principle that at least 5% of the members of the public in elective and appointive bodies are persons with disabilities. So, Speaker, I think it is the right time as a Senate, and I don't know how we will initiate that, where we have progressive reports, because we are passing a lot of legislation. We are requesting, Mr. Speaker, compliance, Mr. Speaker. We are requesting a lot of attention, but there is no one, Mr. Speaker, that can tell us today in county governments in Kenya, this is the number of PWDs that have been elected or appointed across the country. I think for us in the Senate and Parliament, these are issues that we are grappling with, even the county assemblies. But on the appointive aspect, because, Mr. Speaker, appointive is easy. You know, we can argue with you about elective, because if you're having 6 constituencies in Nandi, which one should belong to PWDs? Do you force people to elect PWDs to achieve the threshold? But the easiest way, Mr. Speaker, is to only engage on the counties. Let us do an audit. We've complied at national and county governments, Mr. Speaker. And I think that is, I've seen Senator Kamara has been a great champion of PWDs, or Kenyans who live differently, ably. So, Speaker, I want to confirm to the House that I'm not one of the PWDs, Mr. Speaker. So anyone who is watching or seeing me should not imagine I'm just a temporary PWD, and I hope your office should facilitate my temporary status until I fully recover, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and therefore Article 54 this is the life that is being breathed into Article 54, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, even I want to bring another point. I know my colleagues have talked about devolving the training of people with special needs. I'm proposing, Mr. Speaker, the national government should give tax-free to all assisting devices, so that our people, Mr. Speaker, the hearing aid, the seeing, any process, even the things that are being used by deaf schools in this country, Mr. Speaker, they should be given tax-free. I know there is situation of Inua, sorry, I almost say Inua Mama. Mr. Speaker, Inua Jamii. There was, before those days, there was what we call Inua Mama, but we didn't know where they were ignoring Mama to. But, Mr. Speaker, it was about the Inua Jamii and their registering. Mr. Speaker, the PWDs and the people above 70, I think that's what the Ministry of Interior or the Ministry concerned is doing. So the question should be, when we are doing this registration, there are people, Mr. Speaker, who are also severely impaired, or PWDs that are severely impaired, Mr. Speaker. But when we are registering now, no one is very keen to capture them, these people living that is. And you see, Mr. Speaker, where I come from, the PWDs in my county, for example, Nandi, have complained. And counties are not taking them seriously. For example, in my county, what they do yearly, and you know this is budgeted, they call them to Kapsabet Showground. They give them a soda, mkate, or a loaf of bread, blankets and mattresses, and that is the end. That is how low some of the counties think about PWDs. And unfortunately, my county is leading on having a low view of how our PWDs should be treated in this republic, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I want to laud Senator Kamara. I think this is the right we're having this conversation. And therefore, on the tax-free, Mr. Speaker, I was told the cochlear implant that my brother, Senator Boni Khalwale was talking about, we need to give them tax-free, the devices, hearing aid, Mr. Speaker, reading glasses, any other form, the walking sticks, I know, Mr. Speaker, there are many organizations who are doing it as part of charity, but we must ensure that there is tax-free to any assistive devices to most of our young men and women, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, even public places, access, we must agree, Mr. Speaker, and also the funding of these schools. I know ministry is doing affirmative action. Where I come from, Mr. Speaker, in Kapsabet town, near Namgo, it is a school for the deaf, and it continues, Mr. Speaker. We must push and ensure that they have the proper support from the government in terms of facilities and resource mobilization, Mr. Speaker. You know the problem, Mr. Speaker, we have left the less fortunate in this society to the mercy of charity organizations, where we imagine the people who are PWDs, the attention they deserve is from the NGOs, Mr. Speaker. And you can see these NGOs that fund most of these organizations also come at a strings attached, Mr. Speaker. So we must be honest, and that is why if you listen to most of stories of defilement, rape cases, abuse of children by NGO individuals, and there are cases that have been adjudicated and determined by the court of law, Mr. Speaker, it's majorly these homes were the less fortunate in society. So as a country, I think we need to change attitude. We should not allow our PWDs, including the deaf, to be at the mercy of charity organizations or people who just feel sympathy or people who just want to feel sympathy for them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the fourth point that I wanted to make, this bill, the objects has been well captured. Of course, the issue of tax-free, and then, Mr. Speaker, the issue of stigma. You know, Mr. Speaker, as my colleague have put it across, sometimes you get, either you get such challenges as through an accident or, as my brother Senator Kalwale said, advanced age, and also others are born with. And I think, Mr. Speaker, to ensure we don't have stigma, I have seen the bill has captured that we look a way of integrating the whole family. Senator Kamara has given us an highlight where during the public participation, the parent decided to train everybody, Mr. Speaker. We should see this as reintegration of the entire family, be part of the entire process to ensure we remove stigma in the country and allow that people who are deaf can live a normal life like all of us, can drive, with the assistive devices and the necessary support, Mr. Speaker, it will be easy to proceed, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of course, clause 6, that one has been discussed. And then I wanted to just add a comment on the issue of process of recognition. Mr. Speaker, we must ensure that I heard about the interpreter, so I don't know, whenever nowadays, Mr. Speaker, when you watch news, when we are in our meetings, you see an interpreter. Now that we are doing the Presidential Working Party of Education and we are doing CBC implementation, curriculum-based competence-based curriculum, CBC, Mr. Speaker, I think it is a high time that we have KISE, Kenya Institute of Special Education. We must come up with a uniform syllabus. Even Kenya National Examination, Mr. Speaker, can be the examining body so that we have interpreters that are particular qualification. And then we have quality and standards in place that Senator Professor Margaret Kamar has captured. And of course, Senator Kamar, being a former Minister of Higher Education and Minister of Education before, in her earlier life, it is important that we come and ensure, as the CBC is being rolled out, we ensure such new areas, frontiers in syllabus, especially on interpreters, Mr. Speaker, have an opportunity in place. And I think it is also a challenge to all of us, Mr. Speaker. Let us learn sign language as part of life skills, just like first aid, because you never know where you will be. And Mr. Speaker, we want in future to even have senators, members of parliament, governors, even president, who are either people who are differently blessed, Mr. Speaker. And I know we have a number of colleagues, the co-sponsor, Senator Christo Lasike, Senator Mbugua Mungai, who is the vice chair of the Labour Committee. So, Speaker, it means that you can still be a leader in this country despite that. Mr. Speaker, on recognition by the judiciary, I don't know, because they said the judicial officer shall make a determination. So if we have a structured process of approval of interpreters, Mr. Speaker, it will be even easy, like some of us, when you appear to court, the magistrate, the judge can easily take your number of admission or to the bar and be able to check. So I think in regulation, the senator can still include so that it becomes easy. You know, Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, most of the things we like shortcuts. So if you don't have a proper process, it will be hard. So, Speaker, on clause number 7, I think reintegration on children also that they grow. And also, you know, there are children who are deaf, Mr. Speaker, they should be given the opportunity to reintegrate and be part of the learning process. Mr. Speaker, even as the Teacher Service Commission recruits the hiring of new teachers to fill in the gap across the country, Mr. Speaker, we want to call upon that they should also ensure at least they hire a number of interpreters in our schools so that our children, Mr. Speaker, get opportunity in various schools. I pray one day, Mr. Speaker, you walk to a classroom like here in Starehe Boys Center or Buruburu Girls, and you get a deaf student sitting in classroom because there is an interpreter that has been hired by TSC, Mr. Speaker. Over the weekend, Mr. Speaker, I was in Kericho, Ainamo constituency, where we were burying the first national chairman, Stanley Mutai. And teachers were raising a lot of issues, Mr. Speaker. And I think one of the issues that should be captured is to look at special needs teachers are being part where they had a discussion, Mr. Speaker, in Kericho County on Saturday. And the issue of the localization, Mr. Speaker, is still rearing its ugly head. Mr. Speaker, as government, as the ruling party, we came with a platform of abolishment of delocalization. But it's very sad that some individuals in TSC here in Nairobi still find it wise to still delocalize teachers, Mr. Speaker. You delocalize a teacher from Bomet or Nandi all the way to your county, Kilifi. They are at 58 years old. They have hypertension, Mr. Speaker, or diabetic. They are old, Mr. Speaker. They are looking at the retirement. I think the best that we can do as a country, let us give them the freedom of choice. Because even in northern Kenya, Mr. Speaker, because of insecurity, I've seen teachers, Mr. Speaker, demonstrating at TSC headquarters. I think from northern Kenya, Mr. Speaker, there must be affirmative action on how they can get the native teachers in that region to avoid our sons and daughters, Mr. Speaker, the risk of insecurity in the country. And I think Senator Professor Kithure Kindiki should be seized of the matter, Mr. Speaker. I think as a country, I'm not saying we should be cowards and run away from areas like Northern and Lamu, but as the government pushes to ensure these terrorists are being fought, Mr. Speaker, because terrorists are cowards. They don't agree to face anybody. What they do is they set bombs and IEDs and just run away. But they do. So to Mr. Speaker, I've gotten a lot of complaints and appeal from these teachers who are in Northern Kenya. I know the children of Northern Kenya, Mr. Speaker, deserve to be taught. They deserve quality and affordable education. But as a country, we must be realistic to the facts. I think the long-term solution is trying and having affirmative action in Northern Kenya to have the natives and from that region being part of the hiring by Teacher Service Commission so that, Mr. Speaker, we can be able to resolve. So I want to confirm to the teachers that we were in Kericho over the weekend that on the aspect of delocalization, we shall not relent. Our position is crystal clear. Delocalization was abolished and it should be abolished. Let teachers work where they find it comfortable. It is not a business of government to create crises in families and encourage Kiptindinyas of this world, Mr. Speaker, to infiltrate into the family unit, which is the basic of society of this country, Mr. Speaker. And even, Mr. Speaker, as we discussed about education, you saw the Supreme Court ruling on LGBTQ, Mr. Speaker. And I saw a delegation from Uganda, which you have hosted ably, is we want to thank President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and we wish him long life. And we are happy that he cannot be intimidated or blackmailed by people who want to give aid to Uganda with strings that they should approve issues of lesbianism and gayism. He is the only man who has stood against such intimidation, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say that the Supreme Court, Mr. Speaker, the Constitution is very clear. Family is a basic, as has been defined, Mr. Speaker, family is a man and a wife, Mr. Speaker. And I want to warn, Mr. Speaker, the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. I've seen some books where they define a family, a man and a woman and children. They define a man with children, a woman with children, which are single families. But they go ahead and put a man and children. Then they go ahead and put a woman and children, Mr. Speaker. We should not allow Kenya Institute of the Curriculum to bring respectfully bad manners into our society. The day, Mr. Speaker, and I want to paraphrase what Yoweri Kaguta Museveni said, the day a man will give us a child, then we shall agree with this Western importation of nonsense, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, finally, is to support that we need a regulation. And of course, I agree with Senator Kamar that we need a biodata and have in place, Mr. Speaker, the register for easy confirmation. And then finally, Mr. Speaker, I've seen the senator. I didn't know he has not placed us anywhere as Parliament and as a Senate, Mr. Speaker. Because what we need is, I can see, to persons with this shall in consultation with most representative registered. Mr. Speaker, where I have seen in all closest Senator Kamar through the Speaker, you have insisted only on you have not given us the role of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. We need to know the role of the Senate and Parliament in this process going into the future. And I know Senator Okia Okoitio Mtata Andrew is in court because of such matters. So we are, Mr. Speaker, we are slowly legislating ourselves out of business. Let me use out of business. We are slowly legislating ourselves out of our role as envisaged under Article 96. So we don't want to be relying on the mercy and charity of Senator Okoitio Okia Mtata Andrew to go to court to try and create our own space. This is the right time where we can create our own space, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't know why the Senator of Mombasa is heckling. I know he has missed Mandamano, but he hopes that what happens in Bomas collapses. Mr. Speaker, what I'm just saying is that let us legislate ourselves into our work that we give ourselves, so that we don't go to court. I know Minority Leader was present, Senator Faki was there. We don't need to be every day. We force you, Mr. Speaker, to march from here, and I know you are physically fit. We had to march from the Senate gate all the way to Milimani because we were just fighting over what we should be doing. And I know at that time, Senator Otsosi was enjoying himself in the National Assembly. With those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, allow me to second, not to second, to support and say all the best and congratulations.
Senator Mwaruma.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa hii fursa ili kuchangia mswada ulioletwa bungeni na Mheshimiwa Profesa Margaret Kamar unaoitwa Kenya Sign Language Bill unaonuia kupeana uhai ibara kadhaa katika katiba ya Kenya. Ya kwanza ni ibara ya 53 ambayo inapeana haki ya kila mtu ama kila Mkenya kupata elimu ya msingi na ya lazima. Ibara ya 54 ambayo inapatia Wakenya wanaoishi na ulemavu haki ya kupata elimu, Mheshimiwa Spika, na ibara ya 35 ambayo inapatia wananchi haki ya kupata habari. Kwa muda mrefu hatujakuwa na sheria na sera ambazo zinaangazia vile wananchi wanaoishi na ulemavu wa masikio ambao wanaitwa viziwi vile wanasoma na vile wanapata habari. Mheshimiwa Spika, huu mswada unapelekea kuandika sheria hii ya Kenya Sign Language Bill ambayo itazingatia vile wanafunzi watakavyosoma, wale wanafunzi ambao wako na ulemavu wa kusikia. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, wakati wa kufanya uhusishaji ama public participation katika huu mswada, wengi walifurahi na wakasema kwamba huu mswada kando na kutunga sheria na sera utatoa pia hamasa kwa wananchi wetu na taasisi mbalimbali za kiserikali na zile zisizo za kiserikali ya kwamba kuna watu na kuna wananchi wanaoishi na ulemavu wa kusikia, na hao wananchi wako kwanza kabisa na haki ya kupata maarifa na ujuzi utakaowasaidia katika maisha yao, ama kwa kizungu kupata knowledge and skills zitakaowasaidia katika maisha yao. Mheshimiwa Spika, na nashukuru Mheshimiwa Profesa Kamar na mwenzake ambaye walileta huu mswada hapa bungeni, ambaye ni Senator Crystal Asige, kwa sababu nikiwa mmoja wa wale ambao wako katika kamati ya elimu ya Senate, tulisema kwamba basi ni vyema kuwe na vifaa vya kutosha vya kuhakikisha ya kwamba hawa wanafunzi walio na ulemavu wa kusikia wanapata masomo bila kubaguliwa na waweze kushindana na wenzao ambao hawana ulemavu wa kusikia. Kwa hivyo katika mashule kuwe na vifaa vya kutosha, na wale walimu ambao wanawafundisha wao wamefunzwa vizuri katika taasisi zetu za elimu. La pili, Mheshimiwa Spika, ni kwamba wazazi wa watoto wanaoishi na ulemavu wa kusikia pia wafunzwe lugha hii ya sign language, kwa sababu wakati mtoto amezaliwa anajifunza mambo mengi kupitia kwa lugha. Sasa kama yule mzazi wake haelewi na mambo ya lugha ya sign language ama lugha ya ishara, basi kumsaidia yule mtoto kukua vizuri na kusoma mambo ya shuleni itakuwa ni ngumu sana. La tatu, Mheshimiwa Spika, ambalo linaangaziwa katika hii sheria ni kwamba lugha ya ishara itambulike kama lugha yoyote Kenya, kwa mfano Kiingereza, Kiswahili. Kwa hivyo huu mswada unapelekea kutambuliwa ama kutaka kutambuliwa lugha ya ishara kuwa lugha ya tatu katika zile lugha ambazo zinatumika Kenya. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, huu mswada unasisitiza ya kwamba katika taasisi za kiserikali na zile zisizo za kiserikali ziweze kuweka mikakati ya kutosha ili wakalimani ama watafsiri wa lugha ya ishara waweko. Mfano, Mheshimiwa Spika, katika vyombo vyetu vya habari na Senator Wambua amesema ni kwamba TV kama Citizen, wale ambao wanatazama hiyo TV, kuna mkalimani pale anaitwa Yula Nzale. Kwa hivyo yule msomaji wa taarifa akiwa anasoma, kuna mkalimani ambaye anaelezea kwa lugha ya ishara maana ya yale ile taarifa ambayo inatolewa kwa Kiingereza ama Kiswahili. Na katika koti zetu, Mheshimiwa Spika, huu mswada unasema kwamba ni vyema tuwe pia na watu wa kutafsiri ili kila mmoja aliyeko katika ile koti aweze kuelewa ni mambo gani yanayoangaziwa. Na Mheshimiwa Spika, ningeongezea kwamba katika bunge letu la Senate na National Assembly, ukiangalia hapa ni kama tunaona ya kwamba kwa mfano wale wanafunzi wako pale, hakuna yeyote ambaye ana ulemavu wa kusikia. Na kama kungekuwa na mmoja ambaye ana ulemavu wa kusikia, basi hangeelewa vile ninavyosema. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, ni vizuri kupitia huu mswada tuweze kuwa na mikakati ama kuwe na sheria ama sera za kuhakikisha kwamba katika taasisi za serikali ama zile zisizo za kiserikali tunaweka wakalimani ambao watakuwa na tafsiri katika lugha za ishara. Na tukiwa na mtu ambaye anaongea kwa lugha ya ishara, pia kuwa kuna mkalimani ambaye anatafsiri ili wale ambao hawana ulemavu wa kusikia pia waweze kuelewa ni mambo gani, Mheshimiwa Spika, yanayojadiliwa. Mheshimiwa Spika, katika huu mswada pia unaelezea ya kwamba ni vyema kuwe na msajili ama umeweka msajili wa watafsiri ambaye atasajili wale interpreters ama wakalimani ambayo wa ishara, wasajili wa watafsiri wa lugha ya ishara na Wizara ya Elimu. Kwa hivyo lazima kuwe na huyo msajili, na wale watu ambao watakuwa wakalimani wao wana sifa fulani fulani ambazo zimewekwa na Idara ya Elimu. Mheshimiwa Spika, ningependa kuhamia hapo, lakini niseme kwamba ninaunga mkono huu mswada na ni wakati mwafaka wa kupitisha huu mswada, na nijiunge na wengine na kuwasihi wale wenzangu ili waunge mkono huu mswada na upite. Hii ni mara ya pili huu mswada ulikuja katika Senate muhula uliopita, tukaupitisha na ukaenda kwa nyumba ya National Assembly, lakini ukafilia kule. Kwa hivyo tunaomba kwamba saizi uende kwa haraka upite hii nyumba na pia uende kwa National Assembly upate pia kupita. Nashukuru Mheshimiwa Spika kwa hii fursa.
Senator Faki.
Asante Bi Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii pia kuchangia mswada wa lugha ya ishara ambao umeletwa bungeni na kolabo ya Senator Sige na Senator Kamara. Mheshimiwa Spika, mswada huu utasaidia pakubwa.
Senator Zana, do you have a point of order? Okay.
She was raising her hand so that you can get her attention.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I just wanted you to consider gender when selecting who speaks. Thank you.
Yes, Minority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, umesikia ndugu yangu akisema kwamba aliingia kolabo na mtu mwingine. Kwa hiyo nilikuwa nataka pengine kuuliza kama hilo ni neno ambalo tunalitumia hapa ndani ya bunge au sivyo, na ikiwa sivyo basi aweze kuliondoa ama kulifutilia mbali neno hilo, atumie neno la kisawasawa.
Senator Faki, please withdraw the use of the word collabo. We don't know what that is. Proceed, please. Senator Hezena would want to confirm that Senator Tobiko was actually scheduled, but we are also following the queue. Thank you.
Mheshimiwa Spika, neno kolabo ni neno ambalo latumika Kiswahili, lakini kwa kuwa sijakuwa tayari kujibu hoja ya nidhamu ya kiongozi wa wachache, nitaondosha neno hilo, lakini nitapata fursa siku nyingine ya kulijadili kwa kirefu na kwa kina. Mheshimiwa Spika, mswada ulioko hapa ni mswada muhimu sana kwa sababu tumeona kwamba katiba yetu imetoa haki nyingi sana ambazo wananchi wanastahili kupata, lakini kwa sababu ya kutokuwa na sheria za kuweza kurahisisha haki hizi, imekuwa vigumu wananchi kuweza kupata haki hizo. Moja ya zile haki ni haki ya kuweza kupata lugha ambayo itaeleweka kwa yule ambaye anazungumziwa ama anayezungumza, ili iwe mawasiliano yanakuwa rahisi. Mheshimiwa Spika, tumeona kwamba kumekuwa na ongezeko la matumizi ya watu wanahitaji lugha ya ishara, na japokuwa wazungumzaji wa lugha za ishara wako, lakini bado hawajafikia kiwango cha kutosha ili kila mtu aweze kufaidika. Mheshimiwa Spika, nikitoa mfano, katika mahakama kuu ya Mombasa kwa muda mrefu ilikuwa mwenye kutumia lugha ya ishara ilikuwa ni mtu mmoja peke yake ambaye alikuwa anatakana kutafsiri. Akaondolewa koti ya Mombasa akapelekwa koti ya Kaloleni, na alipopelekwa koti ya Kaloleni kwa kesi nyingi zinalemaa ama zinakwama kwa sababu hakuna mfasiri wa lugha ya ishara. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, mswada huu utasaidia pakubwa kuongeza watu wanaozungumza lugha hii ya ishara ili iwe ni rahisi kuweza kuendesha kazi ama kuendesha mambo kwa wale ambao ni watumizi wa lugha hizi. Mheshimiwa Spika. Mheshimiwa Spika, jambo lingine zuri ambalo litaletwa na lugha hii ni kwamba tutapata wazungumzaji wengi wa lugha za ishara, ambapo itakuwa ni rahisi kuweza kumpata mzungumzaji wa lugha ya ishara ili kuweza kufasiri yale mambo yanayozungumzwa na wale ambao wanaelewa lugha na wanasikia kama kawaida. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa kumalizia ni kwamba ni fursa nzuri kwamba mswada huu tuupitishe. Kama alivyozungumza Seneta Mwaruma, ni kwamba tulikuwa tumeupitisha katika bunge la Senate ukenda ukafa katika bunge la kitaifa. Na safari hii Mheshimiwa Spika, lazima tuongeze juhudi kuhakikisha kwamba mswada huu umepita katika jumba la kitaifa pia, ili hiyo ina sheria inayotumika katika nchi yetu tukufu. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
Senator Seki.
Honorable Speaker, I also want to put my voice to support this bill on issues of that talks about sign language. This bill we have come across in the Education Committee. They want to support because it's a very good bill that will help our people. As you know, the bill has highlighted quite a number of issues, particularly objectives to promote education, quality education, and it provides for training